"I've always thought you were beautiful," he said, his voice quiet, "even when I was a teenager." The words hung in the air of my quiet kitchen, more shocking than a clap of thunder. Hello, everyone. What happens when someone from another generation sees you more clearly than anyone has in years? Today's story is about a quiet woman who is suddenly and unexpectedly seen. If you've ever felt a connection you couldn't explain, press 1 in the comments. Let's dive in. I am 55 years old. That number feels solid, settled, like a stone at the bottom of a river. For most of my life, I cultivated order. I was the kind of woman who found a quiet satisfaction in perfectly pressed curtains, in the neat alignment of dishes in their drying rack, in the polite, predictable wave exchanged with neighbors passing my driveway. My husband, Mark, used to call me his still water. He meant it as a compliment, I think. But after he left a few years ago, the stillness remained while the life it once held evaporated. I wasn't unhappy, not exactly. I was simply present, a ghost polishing the furniture of a life that was no longer truly mine, living in a quiet that was no longer peaceful but empty. But then something happened, a tremor in the still water. It was a moment that began with such ordinary, harmless circumstance and then, with a dizzying shift, altered the very landscape of my world. It forced me to look at myself, at the woman I had become, and at the boy who saw something more, in a way I never had before. It was a Thursday morning, one of those early summer days where the sky is a blanket of soft, pearly gray, and the air has a warm, sticky cling to it. I had just stepped out of the shower, my body loosely wrapped in my old burgundy robe, the one that barely grazed my knees, its frayed belt a testament to countless washes. Solitude was my only planned companion for the day. I was enjoying its quiet company, letting my hair air dry as I sipped coffee by the kitchen window, watching the world go by without me. Then came the knock. 3 soft, hesitant raps on the front door. I froze, my heart giving a little jolt. Who knocks at 9:30 a.m.? On a weekday, salesmen usually came in the afternoon, and friends? Well, friends called first. Padding across the cool tile of the foyer, one hand instinctively clutching my robe a little tighter at my chest, I peered through the narrow side window. It was Leo, my neighbor's son. He was tall and lean, maybe 22, with the kind of unpracticed grace young men have before the world hardens them. His mother, Sharon, had mentioned he was home from college for the summer. I'd seen him a few times, a distant figure mowing her lawn shirtless, earbuds in, lost in his own world, completely unaware of me watching from behind my blinds. I cracked the door open just enough to show my face. "Hi, Leo." "Is everything okay?" He offered a sweet, slightly bashful smile, the kind that held both the boy he was and the man he was becoming. "Hey, Mrs. Carter. Sorry to bug you so early. My mom's not home and, I kinda locked myself out." I blinked. "Out of your house?" He nodded, a flush creeping up his neck. "Yeah, I was taking the trash out and the door slammed shut behind me. I tried calling her, but she's not answering." I think her phone's on silent. My eyes darted down at my state of dress, the robe, my bare legs, my damp, uncombed hair, and I hesitated for a fraction of a second, but the look on his face was so genuinely boyish, so utterly sincere. He wasn't looking at me the way men, the few who even noticed me anymore, usually did. He just looked embarrassed, helpless. "All right, come on in," I said, a playful tone slipping into my voice unexpectedly. "Just try to keep your eyes at eye level, okay?" He let out an awkward laugh and stepped inside, making a point to look anywhere but at me for too long. I led him to the kitchen. poured him a mug of coffee, and tried not to notice how much space he seemed to take up in my quiet home. He was taller than I'd realized, his shoulders broader under a plain white t-shirt that clung slightly to his chest, his hair damp with a light sweat from the humid air. "So," I began, leaning against the counter to create a comfortable distance, "you didn't inherit your mom's key-hiding instincts, huh?" He chuckled, the sound warming the sterile kitchen. "She keeps it in some fake rock, but I swear she moves it every week just to test me." "Classic Sharon," I said, and we both laughed. The silence that fell between us afterward wasn't awkward. It was curious. It was a silence filled with a sudden, unspoken awareness that neither of us had anticipated. My robe had loosened slightly, and as I adjusted the belt, Leo's eyes flicked downward for just a heartbeat before he caught himself and quickly looked away, his cheeks turning a shade redder. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, taking a hasty sip of coffee. I offered a soft smile, feeling an odd, forgotten flicker of something inside me. "It's all right. You're not the first man who's looked. Just maybe the youngest." That made him laugh again, a little nervously this time. "Yeah, well, I wasn't trying to be disrespectful." "You weren't," I said, and I meant it. There was no trace of predatory interest in his gaze, only a fleeting, honest curiosity. We talked for a while about his college classes, his engineering major, his vague, hopeful plans for the future. He spoke with a quiet passion that was endearing. And then, something surprising happened. As he bent to refill his mug from the coffee pot, he glanced over at me and said, "You know, you look really good, Mrs. Carter." It wasn't the words themselves that struck me. It was the delivery. He said them with a low, almost reluctant honesty, as if the thought had been sitting on his tongue for a while, and he had to say it before he lost his nerve. I didn't respond right away. I just watched him, his hands slightly unsteady as he poured, the color in his cheeks deepening. "Leo," I said slowly, carefully choosing my words, "you're very sweet." But he turned, his expression open and raw. "I know it probably sounds stupid. I've always thought you were beautiful, even when I was a teenager." His voice was quiet, his eyes not cocky, but vulnerable. That thick, charged silence returned, heavier this time. And in that moment, the tectonic plates of my quiet, orderly world shifted. I wasn't just a lonely, middle-aged woman in a frayed robe anymore. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't past my prime. But I also knew, with a sudden, sharp clarity, that whatever happened next had to mean something. It had to be more than a fleeting impulse. So I stepped closer, my bare feet silent on the tile, and put a hand on his arm. His skin was warm. "Let's sit down for a minute." And that's where everything truly started to change. I led him into the living room, still feeling slightly outside of myself, watching a stranger pilot my body. The air felt denser in here, charged with unspoken questions. My robe, which had been a simple comfort only moments ago, now felt like a statement, a barrier, or perhaps an invitation. We sat on the couch, leaving a safe cushion of space between us. Leo leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, cradling his coffee mug in both hands as if it were an anchor. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he said, his voice low. I've thought about saying that for years. Do you believe a single moment can change a person's life? Press 1 if you do. I remember coming over with my mom when I was younger, he continued, looking at the floor. You always smelled like vanilla and wore these pretty cardigans, and you smiled at me like you actually saw me, not just some kid in the way. I swallowed hard, a lump forming in my throat. I remembered those visits. Leo, a quiet boy, always lingering in his mother's shadow, his gaze often distant, his shoelaces perpetually untied. His father had been gone for a long time, and Sharon was doing her best. I'd always admired her for it, and maybe I'd even felt a quiet sympathy for the boy with the sad eyes. "You're not a boy anymore," I said, the words surprising me as much as him. He turned to look at me then, and there was a flicker of something intense in his gaze. It wasn't lust, not exactly. It was deeper, a hungry kind of curiosity that asked, "Could this be real?" "I know I'm not," he said, his voice softer now. "And you're not just some lady next door either." That coaxed a small smile from me. "What am I then?" He shrugged, but his eyes held mine. "I don't know. Someone I've always wanted to really talk to. Someone who seems like they've got a whole world in their eyes, even when they think no one's looking." I looked down at my hands, my vision blurring for a moment. "I haven't been seen in a long time," I admitted, the confession tasting like rust. "Not like that." Not fully. We sat in a silence that was more profound than any conversation. Then my hand moved, seemingly of its own accord, and reached for his. His fingers were warm and trembled slightly as they closed around mine, but it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I'm not sure where this is going, Leo," I said quietly, "but I'm not scared of it." His eyes searched mine. "Me neither." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I was keenly aware of everything at once, the thrum of blood in my ears, the warmth of the morning sun filtering through the windows, the immense weight of this small, strange moment that had somehow altered my entire existence. The physical space between us was still there, but the emotional distance was shrinking with every shared breath. As if guided by some silent, mutual understanding, Leo shifted closer. His hand brushed my knee, not accidentally. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. And when his hand lingered there, its touch light, unsure but undeniably real, I looked at him with something that felt like awe. "Can I ask you something?" he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Why did you let me in?" I smiled again, a smaller, sadder smile this time. "Because I needed to remember what it felt like to let something in." He nodded, understanding passing between us. He gently took my hand again, lifting it to his lips and pressing a soft, tentative kiss against my knuckles, a gesture that lingered more in its meaning than in its touch. Nothing more happened. Not then. No lines were crossed, no promises made. But I think we both knew with absolute certainty that something important had begun. Not a tawdry affair, not a mistake, a shift, a recognition. And somewhere deep in my chest, I felt the echo of a heartbeat I thought I'd buried years ago. The rest of that day felt like a dream. He stayed for another hour. We talked about nothing and everything, his post-graduation plans, my old job at the library, the tiny rituals that made up our separate lives. I eventually excused myself and changed into something more proper, a light blouse and soft jeans, but the shift between us was indelible. My robe hadn't been the cause, it had only been the catalyst. Eventually, a text from his mom announced her imminent return. He stood up slowly, reluctant to leave, and I walked him to the door. He paused there, his fingers grazing the doorframe. "Thank you for being here." I nodded, my throat tight. "Thank you for seeing me." Then he was gone. And the house felt different. Not emptier, but stirred, as if someone had finally opened a window in a room that had been sealed shut for years. Over the next few days, I went about my life, but a new current of awareness ran beneath the surface of my routines. I caught myself looking for his car in the driveway. I lingered a little longer by the window in the mornings. I found myself brushing my hair with more intention, dabbing on lipstick for no reason other than the act itself. Then Saturday came. I was trimming the roses out front, the sun warm on my back, when I heard footsteps on the gravel. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. "Hey," Leo said softly. I turned. He was wearing a simple dark green t-shirt and jeans, looking clean-cut and impossibly young, yet a nervous energy clung to him like humidity. "Hey," I replied. "Locked yourself out again?" He smiled. "Nope." "Not this time." He stepped closer. I couldn't stop thinking about you. I know that might sound crazy, and I know you probably have every reason to tell me I'm too young or that this is just some phase, but I don't care. I meant what I said the other day. I didn't interrupt. I let him speak, let the words fill the space between us. "I spend so much of my life around people my age," he said, his gaze earnest. "It's all fast talk and loud energy, always chasing the next thing. But you make space. You breathe in the silence. I feel calm around you. I feel real." My chest tightened. "Leo," I began, but he held up a hand. "Please, I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to see you again. And I wanted you to know that this, whatever this is, it matters to me." His voice didn't shake this time. It was quiet but strong. I stepped forward until I was just inches away. "You're not a kid," I said. "I see that now, and you're right. There is something here, but it's delicate and it's complicated. I've spent a long time guarding myself from risk, from feeling too much, from wanting something I wasn't sure I could ever have again." I took a breath. "I don't want to hurt you, and I don't want to lead you somewhere you'll regret." We stood in that tender tension for a long moment. Then gently, I reached up and brushed a stray strand of hair from his forehead. It was perhaps a motherly gesture, but it was laced with something far deeper. "I'm not ready to define this," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But I'm not ready to walk away from it either." He exhaled, a visible wave of relief washing over him. "Would you," he asked hesitantly, "maybe want to go for a walk later?" "Just talk, no pressure." I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. "I'd like that." He turned to go, then paused. "You smell like roses." "That's because I was in a fight with one," I chuckled, holding up a scratched finger. He laughed, the sound easy and young and full of a freshness that my life had been missing for so long. Then he walked away. I stood there for a long time, watching the space where he had been, the rose clippers still clutched in my hand, the sweet scent of petals in the air. My heart was beating in a rhythm I hadn't known it still remembered. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something, and for the first time in years, I wanted to see where it might lead. As the sun dipped low that evening, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, I stepped onto my front porch. A soft breeze stirred the hem of my light cotton dress. It had been years since I'd felt the flutter of anticipation that now danced in my chest. I hadn't tried to dress younger. I didn't need to. I was simply me, and somehow that finally felt like enough. Leo arrived carrying 2 cold lemonades, that same quiet, nervous smile on his face. He was a beacon of gentle sincerity in a world I'd found to be loud and careless. We started walking down the neighborhood path that curved along the creek behind our houses, a place I rarely visited. The sound of chirping crickets and the rush of water filled the comfortable pauses between our words. We talked about things that didn't need deep answers, books we'd read, childhood memories, the funny habits of our neighbors. But beneath it all was that electric current, a sense that this wasn't just a walk, it was a crossing. We sat on a quiet bench, tucked under an old sycamore tree, bathed in the amber light of dusk. "You know," he said, breaking the silence. I thought coming home this summer would be a waste of time, but being around you, it's been the most honest I've felt in a long time. His words were tender, unpolished, and they landed straight in my heart. I turned to him. When my husband left, I told myself I was done with that kind of feeling. I built a quiet, predictable life. But you cracked something open in me, Leo. Not just attraction, though there's that too. It's something softer, braver. You reminded me that I'm still here. He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw a mix of reverence, hesitation, and want in his eyes. It wasn't possession. It was recognition. He saw me. I don't want to mess this up, he said. You haven't, I whispered. He reached for my hand, and I let him, my fingers twining with his. His thumb moved slowly across my knuckles, grounding us in the here and now. I don't know what comes next, I said. Me neither, he replied, but I'd like to keep finding out. With you. I leaned in then, resting my head against his shoulder. We sat like that as the light faded, the world still and kind around us. There was no dramatic ending, no declarations under the stars. There was only a quiet acknowledgement that life, in all its strangeness, can deliver a new chapter when you've already closed the book. As we stood to walk back home, side by side in the deepening dusk, I felt it again. Hope. Not the reckless hope of youth, but a stronger, quieter kind, born from presence, from being seen, from letting yourself be open, even after the world has told you to close. And maybe that's what real connection is. Not youth or perfection, but two people reaching gently across a line they never planned to cross and finding something honest waiting on the other side. What did you think of Carol and Leo's story? If it resonated with you, press 1 down below. Remember to take care of yourselves and each other.